for reality is not for me, and it makes me laugh. Oh, Industry Girls. That's Industry Girls by the Beach Boys. If you know, you know. So a quick side note before we get into today's video. I was supposed to be making a video about every single NBA team before the NBA season started. I started at the beginning of October, and I didn't succeed. These long-form videos where I'm just ranting and raving for 12 minutes take a lot of time to edit and make. Probably sit in front of a camera for about 35 minutes straight and just talk about nonsense and just edit it down to make it adequate for that a viewer might want to watch it. So now going forward, I think it's just best for me to go the route of making 5-minute videos and just trying to cover the teams as we're going on. The season started last night, and I'm not going to allow those games to influence me or my opinion. All of the teams are playing tonight. I don't care. We're just going to keep going forward. So today's video is about the Los Angeles Lakers, and let's just get into it. So my coaching segment for the Los Angeles Lakers is a relatively simple one. I don't believe that Frank Vogel is that great of a coach. I think Frank Vogel has done the best job at being a LeBron pawn in the history of LeBron's coaches, where Eric Spoelstra was a strong-willed system coach, and Tyronn Lue figured out his way to be this great dynamic coach in this league. I think that Frank Vogel differs from those players as he is kind of just this coach who's worked his way up the ranks, was a good coach at some point, and now kind of just does things for the sake of doing them. He basically does the bare minimum that a coach does, where he just takes the timeouts when he's supposed to. He writes up plays when he's supposed to. He communicates with players when he's supposed to. But he's not exactly that great at it. The majority of the Los Angeles Lakers offense come from one gentleman, and his name is LeBron James. In fact, the whole entire roster comes from that gentleman at this point. There's no sugarcoating it. LeBron James has full control over this Los Angeles Lakers media machine, and Rich Paul does as well. It's not a conspiracy, it's just basic fact. So when talking about this Los Angeles Lakers team, you have to focus heavily on LeBron James as an individual and say to yourself that the rest of the team sort of performs if he is at his healthiest and at his best. And that's not to say they didn't have a good offseason. They've retooled completely, only retaining 3 players from the previous season. Every single one of those Laker players are now on different teams, and they will be productive and enjoyable players on those teams. It's one of those things that if you think about the Lakers, pretty much all the talent in the league that you see everywhere has a tie to former Laker teams. For many years there, they just attracted and acquired and developed a shit ton of talents that we see around the league. So it's actually kind of unique to see such a older group of individuals on this team now, where these players, despite having some played for the Lakers during that championship era, and have to figure out their role within this offense, which it's not going to be an easy task. They have a lot of talent, but it's a matter of those talents not breaking out into roles that are detrimental for the team. So that brings me to Russell Westbrook and the acquisition this summer, where sure, they traded away 3 pieces that weren't exactly helping them too much between Montrezl Harrell, KCP, and Kyle Kuzma. They acquired Russell Westbrook because I think they just needed a player that will allow them to coast into the playoffs this year and not have to rely on LeBron and Anthony Davis that heavily. Whereas those players that I mentioned earlier that left the team filled out the roster entirely. I think that the Lakers' philosophy at this point is that if you have LeBron and Anthony Davis healthy and on your team, you're going to win a championship. And limiting the minutes of Russell Westbrook come playoff time may have to be an option that Frank Vogel looks at. But all that being said about Russell Westbrook, they did acquire 2 actually talented players for a lot less money than they're supposed to be making in Kriss Dunn and Malik Monk. And those 2 signings came as big surprises for NBA fans, as it did not seem like those 2 players needed this type of environment. Yet I think that the Los Angeles Lakers are this huge marketing machine that it's just good for talents like them to go there, play their ass off, go to a different team, and get paid. 2 players that come to mind when I'm thinking of the kind of role that Malik Monk and Kriss Dunn are in are PJ Tucker and Javel Mcgee, where you can have these 2 players that maybe overperform a little bit on these championship teams or perform to a level in which they're being utilized completely correctly in that situation, and then go into an offseason and get overpaid by a team. And that's not to say that they're bad players by any means, but going to championship level teams like this can turn out to be good for one's career in the future. So do I think that they're going to make a huge impact on these teams? Yes, I think that Malik Monk and Kriss Dunn as youthful players are actually going to be utilized extremely well during this season. Because as I said about Russell Westbrook, I think that these players similarly are going to be those youthful talents that are going to help them get over the finish line of 48-minute games with a win. It's a funny flip side situation where you have a lot of teams that have youthful talent that need veteran leadership in order for them to develop and get better and understand the game. Whereas in this situation, they have too much veteran leadership that they need youthful talents to come in and win a little bit more games without the burden being placed on LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And it's hilarious at this point because Anthony Davis has to be treated like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar when he was 48, where you have to acquire like James Worthy, obviously, the Lakers got lucky in that situation, but where you have to acquire like a James Worthy in order to allow Kareem to sort of get the burden place off of them, but you need Kareem to win that championship. That being said, let me get into my predictions phase and my players to watch. My player to watch this year is Anthony Davis. Just watch him because of his health. Watch him because he's a fantastic player. He's one of those players that if he's on a basketball court, you're just enamored by him. He does have a ton of size, but he uses it in such different ways than a lot of bigs have ever used it. He's so nimble but his play style and genetics, I guess, make for him to get injured a lot. So as long as Anthony Davis is healthy, they're going to be a successful team. That being said, their second round exit, I anticipate them to get 51 wins.